Hey folks, hope you're well. Zito here. This week I'm coming at you with this, an axe made with recycled skateboards and stuff. It's been in my head to make one of these things probably since I started making things with recycled skateboards. I always just thought it was pretty badass looking and stuff like that. After actually researching into a whole bunch of like YouTube videos and stuff like that, to me it almost seems like it's pretty sketchy to use something with so many joints. Something with a dowel in it, it seems like, it really would be more ornamental. So that's really what this axe is, but it was definitely still pretty fun to make and stuff. So yeah, I figured I'd slap this together and yeah, here's basically the process of how that was made. I hope you enjoy it. Cheers. So this project essentially started off with scraps I actually had at the wood shop. With two angled glue ups of skateboards that I've kind of had left over from previous projects, I decided to cut them up. Into like 1-inch thick strips each. With the two slices cut up, I decided to glue them together in this chevron style pattern here. After having left them overnight, it still wasn't quite long enough for the actual handle of the axe. So what I decided to do was actually take this 4-inch dowel here, and I was going to basically join the two pieces up with this piece of oak that I essentially found from the scrap bin. First things first, to basically have a nice flush joint, I actually took the two pieces and I used the chop saw and squared things up. After squaring things up, I took it all to the drill press, drilled in a little over 2 inches on the new piece of skateboard and also the piece of oak there. With that done, I used a little bit of West System epoxy between the two joints there. And with the dowel going through both, I decided to take the mallet and start hammering them away until I got a fit there. And of course it fit really well. So after I found that it fit really well, I then would take a clamp it together and leave that overnight up until the point I have a full blank to make this axe. With the full axe handle essentially put together, I then took the existing axe, and the daunting part here was essentially taking that axe and then actually cutting that on the bandsaw. It was a bit daunting because, the actual handle of this thing is actually quite nice and stuff. But the beauty of it was that I traced that onto my handle, my handle blank, and then be able to reproduce that with, of course, my beautiful skateboards and also the oak, of course. So once I actually had the shape traced out, cut it on a bandsaw and everything like that, we were ready to essentially use one of my favorite tools, which is the spoke shave. Let's cue the montage. So once shaved roughly to shape, I cleaned it up with a variety of sanders in our shop. You kind of have your belt sanders, and then you also have your random orbital sanders. And I essentially kept it, pretty loose. Probably started with 80 grit and went up to 120 grit and stuff in terms of sanding. And then with the handle essentially completely ready at that point, I then would cut a slit into the top where it would go through the actual axe head, just so that we can fit a wedge into it. And then from there, with the handle, I'd put that in a vise, and then I would actually take the head and try and fit it in. Of course, every fitting, I would see where I was getting stuck and stuff like that. With my spoke shave at my side, I'd then be able to essentially knock off any high points on the handle and then keep trying to fit it up until a point where I actually had a fit. So it was a bit of a repetitious process, but once I actually did have that fit, the next part was essentially to drive in a wedge. Again, another piece of scrap walnut that I found. I thought the contrast would look great, so I cut it into the wedge and slammed that thing in with the mallet, which worked out well. From the old head, I found the pins that were in the old axe, and I actually used one of those and drove that into the walnut and the oak top as well. And with that, essentially, I had pretty much had my ornamental axe complete. Afterwards, I threw a little bit of Danish oil, and it just really popped after that, I found, which was really beautiful. But yeah, So essentially, that's kind of the process of how I went through making this axe. It was honestly super, super fun to make. And I'll probably give it some light use and stuff like that, just to test out and just for me to know. All of this stuff really is just a science to me, and I'm experimenting and having mad fun with it. For folks watching, I know last week I also promised costs with regards to the cabin as well. I've started putting all that stuff together in spreadsheets, and I feel like I've gone through every receipt. I'm just gonna double check all my numbers and everything and come at you with a comprehensive video for next week and stuff. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video, and much more to come. A lot of cabin work coming up this weekend too, so should be a good one. Anyways, thanks, take it easy, peace.